Transpiration is a really, really important piece of plant biology. Transpiration is how that water moves through the plant. Why does it move in? Then what causes it to move? So it's a movement from the roots all the way up through the plant to the leaves, and then even actually outside the plant. So this lesson today is an overview of the whole of transpiration, looking at why and how the water moves. So if we start by just what is transpiration? Okay, we have a beautiful definition. So we'll do that, the whole concept of typing our definitions again. So transpiration is the loss of water vapor, see there, water vapor, from a plant's leaves to its environment. Okay, so we are talking here that water evaporates from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells, and then water vapor diffuses out of the leaf via the stomata. So that's rather a long definition. There's quite a lot going on in there. So we're going to just pick out a couple, whoa, not turn the whole thing pink. We're going to pick out a couple of important pieces. Okay, it is the loss of water vapor, not the loss of water, okay, loss of water vapor from the leaves to the environment. Okay, and it's really important. We can't just lose drops of water. It's not liquid water that's leaving, okay? It's evaporation from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells and then diffusion out of the stomata. So that is what transpiration is. But now we just talked about the fact that water comes into the plant from the roots. So what we're going to do is it's actually one big connected system, and that's why it works. So if we go all the way back to the very beginning of this, the water is in the soil. The water then moves from the soil into the root hair cell, and that is our osmosis, okay, because we're going across the membrane from the soil into the root hair cell. Then we go across the root cortex, and we get into a vascular bundle. In particular, inside that vascular bundle, the water is traveling in the xylem. Go in the vascular bundle, all the way up the stem, all the way to the leaves. Okay, once we get into the leaves, we're going to leave that vascular bundle and move towards the mesophyll cells. Now this is both the Palisade and the Spongy. So your Palisade mesophyll cells and your Spongy mesophyll cells. From the walls of these cells, we can evaporate. Water evaporates from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells. Okay, we evaporate into the air spaces in the leaf. Then we can diffuse out through the stomata back into the external environment. But in this case, of course, it would now be in the air rather than in the soil. So we've gone from the external environment, soil, all the way through the entire plant, back out to the external environment in the air. So obviously some of the water has been used on the way, but some of it is lost, and that's what causes this transpiration pull. Okay, so if we just add in a few other little bitties here. So soil, root hair cell, remember this is your specialized cell with a long thin extension, the root hair, okay, and it's a plant cell, so it gets a cell wall. Okay, and that long thing in the extension is to increase the surface area so we can have more water that comes in through osmosis. Crossing the root cortex, we have that gradient across the root cortex. We get to the vascular bundle in the center of the root. Remember, the xylem in the root looks like an X. X marks the spot. There's your xylem in the very middle of your root. But as we travel up that vascular bundle in the stem, it splits into many vascular bundles all the way around the outside of the stem. And then we branch off to the leaves. So if we look at a cross-section of a leaf with a midrib, there's our major vascular bundle, and then we have smaller ones in the leaf. Okay? By the time we get to these mesophyll cells and the air spaces, things are a lot more complicated. We're going to look at that just now in a bit more detail. And then you get your stomata. Remember, your stomata can be open or closed, because stomata are all about gas exchange. Okay, so if your stomata is open, then your water vapor can get out. If the stomata is closed, then the water vapor is going to stay inside the plant. There's nowhere to get out. Then back out to that external environment of the air. So water is coming in from the bottom of the plant, it's traveling all the way up the plant, and then it's being lost at the top or used. But the thing is that we've got to think about it, even though we think about the sort of journey of a water molecule from the bottom to the top, the reason that it's moving is that transpiration pull from the top. If we did not lose this water here, there would be no reason for water to come in. And that's why we talk about the transpiration pull. Okay, so the transpiration pull is all about the loss of water vapor from the leaves So this creates low pressure in the leaf, low water pressure. This pulls the water up the plant. So you've got to think of it like one long straw going the whole way through the plant. So if you suck at the top, the water is going to come all the way up from the bottom. Okay, and it comes up because, very cool, molecules of water are actually stuck together. They stick together. So the fancy word for this is cohesion between water molecules. And that's why when you pull at the top, they all travel up. So it pulls water from the roots all the way up the plant, and now we have lost water from the roots. So we've created that gradient in the root. So a gradient created in the root. So water enters the root via osmosis. So even though in your book, in your lessons, often when we talk about it, we talk about the first thing being water entering the plant. But that's actually, when we think about it properly, the last thing that happens. Because the transpiration pull starts at the top of the plant, and it's the removal of the water that then brings all the water up. So let's just have a little bit more talk about the little technical details that happen then on the way. So in the root, starting with the root hair cell. Here, of course, you have your osmosis. So osmosis, so down a water potential gradient. From the soil into the cell. So we're going from a high water potential to a low water potential, going down the water potential gradient from the soil into the cell. Then that water's got to move across the root, okay? So that again is because there's now less water in the vascular bundle because it's being pulled up. So there's a gradient across that cortex. So we have a water potential gradient across the cortex. So water moves towards and into the xylem. So now we're in that xylem. So then we remember our sticky water molecules. So cohesion pulls water up the xylem vessels. Now we get to the leaf. So the water is going to exit the xylem vessel. Because we have a water potential gradient across leaf. So water moves out of the xylem to the mesophyll cells. So now we hit the mesophyll cells. But think about it. Palisade mesophyll cells, now you've got the site of photosynthesis, so we're going to use a whole lot of water there. So Palisade mesophyll, water used for photosynthesis. Spongy mesophyll, not so much photosynthesis going on there. So we have more extra water. So what happens is we get a collection of water in the cell wall. So it collects a bit in the Palisade mesophyll cells. We're not saying that the water never is in the Palisade mesophyll cell walls. We're saying there's more in the spongy mesophyll cell walls. So what happens then, of course, is the water will evaporate from those cell walls. Okay, so now we've got water vapor in the air spaces. And then, if the stomata is open, the water vapor can escape. And there's your transpiration, loss of water vapor. Loss of water vapor by diffusion through stomata to that external environment. So it really does give a wonderful overview of all sorts of things if we're just looking at transpiration, because we have osmosis here at the beginning. We have our water potential gradient. We have the inclusion of our xylem. We have cohesion between water molecules. We have another water potential gradient. We have a reminder of photosynthesis. We have evaporation. We have water vapor. And we have diffusion. And we have stomata. So you see, everything is getting pulled in together. And that's why this is a lovely topic for an exam question, because we're looking at so many different things. So because there's so much interesting things going on here in the leaf, I just want to look at that in a bit more detail. So in our leaf, we're going to have to draw a quick leaf here. So this, of course, is not how you would draw a leaf if you were drawing it for an exam. You would take a lot more time and be a lot more particular. Okay. So then under this piece we have here, and you can already hopefully see what it is, where I started, where I am now. Okay, all of these are plant cells, so they all get a double line. A beautiful, even, narrow double line when you're drawing them. Okay, underneath here, things are not quite so even and uniform. Some of them don't even look normal shapes of plant cells. But they are all plant cells. So they all get their cell wall. Then at the very bottom, we have another layer, rather similar to the top. So we're going to start just by labeling this diagram so that everybody is on the same page as to what we're talking about. At the very, very top, we have here the upper epidermis. So all about protection and waterproofing of the leaf. Near the top of the leaf here, we have our Palisade mesophyll cells. Okay, the Palisade mesophyll layer, all about photosynthesis. Then we have this far more interesting spongy mesophyll layer. So here, this here is a Palisade mesophyll cell. This is an epidermal cell. These wobbly, funny-shaped ones are the spongy mesophyll cell. And this gap here is actually an air space. So we started at the top with the upper epidermis. Down here at the bottom we have the lower epidermis. So again, we have an epidermal cell. But the difference is, on that lower epidermis, we have the stomata. One is a stoma. And on either side of the stoma, we have guard cells. So they're the ones that change shape to open and close the stomata. So here's our leaf, okay, cellular structure, internal of the leaf. And we say this water comes along and it ends up in the cell walls of often our mesophyll cells, and in particular our spongy mesophyll. So this liquid water is going to evaporate out of these cell walls into water vapor. So we'll make water vapor now dotty. So all these air spaces in that spongy mesophyll have water vapor in them. Now, if the stomata are open, this water vapor can pass straight out by diffusion. Okay, so we have high water potential inside, we have low water potential outside, we have lots of water vapor inside, little water vapor outside, and therefore we get a diffusion gradient. So lots of water vapor on the inside, open stomata, the water vapor moves out by diffusion. So we have evaporation inside the leaf, diffusion to get outside the leaf. The question that's come through, Palisade mesophyll cell looks a bit like a palace pillar. Nice. Okay, so they're tall columns. The Palisade mesophyll cell, that's a nice way to remember them. They look like the pillars at a palace. So that's your Palisade mesophyll, all about photosynthesis, which also starts with a P. Okay, so we have our upper epidermis, Palisade mesophyll, Spongy Mesophyll, lower epidermis with stomata in it. And it's all about that movement out. That's our transpiration. So if we want to actually define transpiration visually, this is it here. Okay, that loss of the water vapor from the inside to the outside, from the air spaces in the spongy mesophyll layer to the air in the external environment. So when those stomata are open, then we have this gradient and we can have the diffusion. But what else affects it? Because it's not always the same all the time. There are 4 important factors that affect transpiration. So the first factor, of course, would be light intensity. Because light intensity is going to affect our stomata. The stomata are going to be open or closed. So high light intensity is going to be the stomata open, okay, because that's when photosynthesis occurs, and our stomata are opening to allow that gas exchange for photosynthesis, carbon dioxide in, oxygen out. So here we establish a water vapor gradient. At higher light intensities, more photosynthesis, more stomata open, more diffusion of water vapor. Second one is temperature. This diffusion is all based on random movement, okay? It's all kinetic energy. So when we increase temperature, we increase energy, and therefore we increase diffusion. The third one is going to be humidity. We need a gradient to exist before diffusion is going to happen. So if it's raining or if it's really humid and sticky outside, right, then there's not going to be that dry air outside the plant. So maybe the water vapor is the same on the outside and the inside. No gradient, no movement. So in high humidity, we have low transpiration. And the fourth one is a similar thing, air movement, which would also be wind speed. If we go back to our diagram here, if we had a wind that was coming across and blowing all this water vapor away, then of course we're maintaining that gradient. We're maintaining lots of water vapor on the inside, not much on the outside. So it's going to keep coming out. If there's no wind, well, water vapor is going to collect outside the stomata, and therefore we're going to decrease that gradient. So high temperature, high humidity, and high winds are all going to increase the water vapor gradient. And if we increase that gradient, then we're going to increase the diffusion of the water vapor, and that is going to then lead to increased transpiration. So high light intensity, high temperatures, low humidity. Okay, it's a little bit back to front because we want dry air on the outside. So that would be low humidity. And we would want high wind speed. These 4 factors are going to increase transpiration. So whenever you're looking at a situation, then you are always looking, what's my light intensity, what's my temperature, what's my humidity, what's my air movement, and how's that then going to affect my rate of transpiration? And always, when you've got a higher light intensity, more gas exchange, more stomata open, more diffusion, more transpiration. When you have a high temperature, more kinetic energy, more movement, increased transpiration. When you have low humidity, dry air, bigger difference between inside and outside, bigger gradient there, increased diffusion, increased transpiration. And then the last one, high air movement, so high wind speed, blow that water vapor away from the outside of the leaf, then we're going to increase transpiration. And what's really cool is there's a whole range of adaptations that plants have in order to try and control this transpiration, so that plants can live in places like deserts where there's high temperature and low humidity, and yet there's still high light intensity. How can that plant change things and adapt its little microenvironment and do things to its leaves so that it can reduce transpiration and conserve water? Because those plants want to conserve water. Every drop is precious. So when it comes to factors affecting transpiration, learn them solid, because then when you learn about adaptations of plants, it makes a whole lot more sense.